Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Today, a federal judge sentenced one of the most infamous figures in the January 6th attack on the Capitol to 10 years in prison. Proud Boy Dominic Pezzola was convicted of 6 felonies for his actions that day, along with several other members of the far-right quasi-militia group. On January 6th, Pezzola was the first person to breach the Capitol building, smashing open a window with a riot shield he'd stolen from an officer. Inside the building, Pezzola led a group of rioters through the halls where they came within sight of Senator Chuck Grassley, then third in line to the presidency, as he was evacuated from the Senate chamber. Pezzola also filmed himself in the Capitol, smoking what he called a victory cigar, though that didn't really turn out. Now, Pezzola was actually the third Proud Boy to be sentenced this week. Yesterday, Judge Timothy Kelly handed down a 15-year sentence to Zachary Rehl, who led 200 people to the Capitol on January 6th, and 17 years for Joseph Biggs, whose prosecutors described as the tip of the spear throughout the attack. This afternoon, he also sentenced Ethan Nordean, former president of the Proud Boys Seattle chapter, to 18 years. Those men received longer sentences because they were convicted of the rare and quite serious charge of seditious conspiracy. Dominic Pezzola was the only one of his co-defendants to be acquitted on that charge. Today, in front of Judge Kelly, Pezzola expressed remorse, calling his actions, quote, the worst, most regrettable decision in his life. He was also seen wiping away tears while his wife and mother spoke to the court, pleading for mercy on his behalf. But after the judge announced the 10-year sentence, as he's being led out of the courtroom, Pezzola turned to the gallery, raised a fist, and shouted, quote, Trump won. Now, so far, all of these sentences for members of the Proud Boys have represented significant downward departures from the federal sentencing guidelines and the government's request. Prosecutors asked for 33 years for Joseph Biggs, 30 for Zachary Rehl, 27 for Ethan Nordean, and 20 for Dominic Pezzola. They each received a lot less than that. And as I've said before, I'm generally in favor of lower sentences. I think this is something we get wrong in this country. Prison sentences in the U.S. are much more severe than our peers, averaging twice as long as the next country, which is Hungary. But I also got to say, as these January 6 cases pile up, it's become even clearer that we live in a country with a two-tier system of justice, and it's enraging. On January 6, 2021, thousands of people descended on the Capitol in a violent attack broadcast live on television. There were just a handful of arrests that day. Nearly all those people left freely. They went home. Now, to their credit, the DOJ then launched a massive investigation charging more than 1,000 rioters. The vast majority of them have not been in jail while they await trial. And that itself is not the norm. Let's be clear. Studies show that 75% of people charged in federal court are detained pre-trial, many because they cannot afford bail. And yet, there are some that were detained pre-trial. And some of those jailed January 6 defendants and their allies, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump, have loudly complained about the conditions of their detention. Well, the conditions in American jails are awful. That's true. It's true for everyone who goes there. Most of the time, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump and all the rest don't really care much about it. Take the Fulton County Jail, for example. Well, Donald Trump briefly stopped in last week, pulled up in a giant motorcade, a pre-negotiated bond agreement, spent a grand total of about 20 minutes inside. Ever since, the ex-president has been whining about how humiliating it was to have his mugshot taken. Of course, much worse things happen in that jail to people who go there for things that are, to my mind, much less serious than trying to overthrow American democracy. 23 people have died while in custody at the Fulton County Jail in a little over 3 years. Just last week, listen to this, a 34-year-old inmate was found dead days after he sent a desperate letter to federal court about his treatment at the jail. This week, one detainee was killed, 2 others injured in multiple stabbings. There's an ongoing DOJ civil rights investigation into the jail's conditions. The place is a human rights disaster. That's the context to remember when people like Donald Trump and his co-defendants complain about being persecuted or treating unfairly. 18 of the 19 co-defendants in the Fulton County election RICO case have not set foot in a cell. I should note the one person who did, the only black man charged, Harrison Floyd. He was detained for 5 days after turning himself in without a lawyer and without negotiating a bond agreement ahead of time. Floyd also had a recent arrest on his record for allegedly charging an FBI agent who served him with a grand jury subpoena earlier this year. So, as we all watch the legal maneuvering of these defendants, as we analyze it and dissect it, and they're exercising the due process they're entitled to by the U.S. Constitution, we just have to remember their experience, this experience we're watching play out, is completely and totally removed from the actual day-to-day reality of how the American criminal justice system works. The vast majority of defendants in this country are not running around filing motions and selling T-shirts with their mugshots on it. They are sitting in jails that are often dangerous, where they may get a few visits from their public defender before they go and plead guilty. That's how the system normally works. What Donald Trump and his co-defendants, including the Proud Boys, have experienced can only be described as the white glove, bespoke, five-star, top-tier version of the American justice system. And they still say they're being unfairly persecuted. And they are still largely undeterred. I mean, that's clear as Donald Trump continues flying around in his private jet. His former lawyer, John Eastman, keeps making TV appearances. It's clear from the behavior of Proud Boy Dominic Pezzola in court today when he stood up, called himself a changed and humble man, received a 10-year sentence, again, significantly less than prosecutors asked for. And when the judge left the room, Dominic Pezzola turned to the gallery to yell, "Trump won." I'm not sure if the lesson is really getting through.